Excellent. So, councillors, if we can just get everybody back to the table. There's a few people going to be earlier. Is going to bring us into the last presentation of the day, which is our local government is currently out. So I'll over to you and take us away.
Thank you, Chair. So, yes, today is about the Local Government Improvements Bill, which is currently out for consultation. It was introduced into Parliament on the 15th of July and will be open until the 27th of August, and that's been run by the Governance and Administration Select Committee. And so the process that we'll take for this submission is, given the timeframes, at the end of August, we'll seek high-level direction on the submission today and provide an overview of the bill, and then a draft submission will be circulated to councillors for feedback and ahead of finalising that for delegated sign-out by the Chair, given the timeframes. So before we get into the details, just a bit of background. So as I mentioned, the bill was introduced in mid-July to progress the back to basic measures that had been announced by the government a year ago at the LGNZ conference, the back to basics measures, refocusing the purpose of local government. Also in July, there were benchmark metrics released on DIA's website at the end of July, so some of the amendments we'll talk about today in terms of setting that framework for the future. There are some cabinet decisions flagged on amendments that we won't get into today, but they're an important part of the context, and that's options for a rates peg model, and they're being considered by government, and decisions are expected this year on that, and also some other changes around long-term plan audit requirements and other planning and reporting amendments. And also just to note that this bill is a broader reform program, including resource management and local water done well, which is also relevant to the performance measures. So the amendments are grouped into 5 broad themes. So what I'll suggest today, Chair, is if we take these in 3 blocks. So run through the overview of the purpose and core services and measures first, then stop for discussion, then move to the strengthening council accountability, and then move to the regulatory relief amendments. Yep.
Sounds good.
So in terms of the Section 10 and Section 11, these are reinstating the purpose and the core services that were in the Local Government Act pre-2019. The one adjustment there from the previous Local Government Act before the Community Wellbeing Amendment Act in 2019 is that Section 10C there to support local economic growth and development by fulfilling the purpose of the Section B there. In terms of the core services, similar to what it was previously, pre-2019, with the exception of waste management, that used to be solid waste collection and disposal, and civil defence emergency management has replaced avoidance or mitigation of risks. And there is also an additional financial management principle for councils, meaning that in determining its approach to financial management, council must have particular regard to the purpose of local government and the core services of the local authority. In terms of the measuring and publishing of council performance measures, so the first bullet there that reflects performance measures that other regulators might prescribe. So, for example, to bring the Act up to date with the local water done well, and if performance measures are being set out in different bits of legislation. The second bullet point, so that's expanding on the regulation making power to enable benchmarks to be set, and so that's also moving it into secondary legislation to make it easier to change. Requiring councils to report on contractor and consultant expenditure. That's looking at the end of 2027 at this stage. And also making the issuing of rules by the Secretary for local government discretionary rather than mandatory. And so that also means that the Minister has some discretions around consultation. And direction sought today. So in the past, despite various changes to the purpose and the core services, there's been limited impact on council decision making. However, whilst the amendments largely reinstate to what was pre-2019, it's important to note that future settings around proposed rate peg limiting council expenditure on certain activities, the performance measures and the financial management principle may provide for further scrutiny and legal risk in terms of services and activities and decisions around those. So the risk to councils will be around non-core activities or activities that the community may expect. So noting that regional and local government have a very broad range of legal obligations, about 50 statutes, and including regional council, covering resource management, soil conservation, maritime, biosecurity, building act, treaty settlements, land transport planning. So there's a couple of things that we could recommend in the submission there, proposing some clarity around the list of core services. First, around that civil defence emergency management one. The current definition in the civil defence emergency management does clearly cover natural hazards, but could provide some further clarity there just in terms of understanding for the public and being more meaningful. And also an additional bullet point there around having something that would cover the other services and activities required under these number of legislations that regional government work under. And in terms of the performance management, supportive of improved understanding for the public about performance of councils, but in terms of implementation, just providing some feedback there around encouraging to work with councils to understand the context, understand the current measures that are used, and development of consistent guidance and definitions just to mitigate increased cost of reporting or unintended circumstances there. So I'll just pause there for councillors' feedback. Yeah.
Councillor Scott.
Yeah, just like comment that we had an interesting discussion in our strategy and planning meeting this morning about people not having a chance to get involved in submissions. Where are the councillors? Where the hell are they? I mean, that disappoints me completely that we've got at least less than half of us in the room. And then we start, when we get into a council meeting, we start... I beg your pardon?
There is more than half, but I know what you're saying.
There is what?
There is more than half. Anyway,
there's more than enough.
And then no, more than half, and there's two online as well.
Well, whatever, but the other ones here, the complaining ones aren't here. Where are they? I suggest you have a word with them and remind them that we have a process. We talked about process this morning. We're not following process. It's disturbing.
Have you got a question, though?
No, just a comment.
Okay. Councillor Mackay.
Just with regard to the bottom bullet point around the implications, given that we've got a DIA framework, which seems to have been changed from the original, which is good, is that the framework that you're talking about there? Or it's an additional reporting mechanisms that are obviously going to be required? Because I did look at the bill and it's around there does look to be some additional stuff that we might have to report on, or the CE might have to be responsible for reporting on. How are you? What are you thinking? Are you thinking of sort of having a bit of a discussion around the DIA and giving them a bit more advice there?
So the benchmarks that have been published, they're a start of it. So they're intending to expand on those and provide more measures in the future, so that people can compare councils and performance and
Councillor Edge.
Yeah, I was thinking about what this is all about, and I think we do a pretty good job already in terms of communication, and some of these things are already in train. I'm thinking of our consultation and engagement policy and the way we communicate. It can be better, of course, but we're also following some of the requirements of the Auditor General in terms of making sure that we are reporting, that we are being more transparent, that we now open our meetings to the public in most cases. So if you look at all that raft of things that have happened in the last 6 months, say, I think we probably do cover quite a few of these advisory discussion sort of things, really. I know something that we haven't really reported on is our citizens. I don't remember what we call it now. The citizens group that we have. Can't remember what.
The citizens panel.
So the citizens panels that we have, really, we haven't really seen any reports on that. But then in our annual reporting thing, we do have those surveys, those public surveys as well. So we do have a reasonably good handle on things. Anyway, that's me.
Councillor Cromwell.
Jordan, the definition, I suppose, in 10 and 11A seems to confine, our mahi, and you can't, how do you say it? So you talked about going to pre-2019. So 11A, is that similar to what it was pre? I'm just trying to remember the LGA back then. I suppose when the full wellbeings came in, it created the opportunity to broaden the scope, so to speak, and by suppose taking them out and just bringing it back in together and trying to define exactly what you seem to be doing. Is there an example, I suppose, that we have to stop doing now because if it goes back to straight 11A?
I can't off the top of my head, think of a specific example. But in terms of how it's different from pre-2019, it was the main change is in that section 10 about the C to support local economic growth and development by fulfilling the purpose. And 11A is around there's change in terms for the waste management that was previously solid waste collection disposal. And D, the civil defence emergency management, that was previously avoidance or mitigation of natural hazards.
Councillor Sunkel first, and then Councillor Mackay.
Thanks for this. I guess I'm still a wee bit confused as to local government. When I think local government, I think territorial authorities or city versus regional government, and just really trying to work out our role in this conversation as opposed to the TA role. And we do have those distinct functions that you've noted. Some of them are noted within the document, but I guess they kind of relate more to TA. So I'm just really trying to understand our role in this conversation, or what do we believe government thinks our role is in this conversation?
Yes, I mean the Local Government Act covers local and regional government, so very much have a place in this. But I guess in terms of going back and providing that clarity about what it is that regional council offers.
So I guess if I'm just looking at our functions as they are, I don't necessarily see them sort of set out within the framework that sits in here. Some of it is not. So that's the challenge for me. Yes, we do transport, but so do TAs. Yes, we are the authority within which provides the administrative background to grouping for civil defence, but we don't run civil defence. But our science and teams inform on the hazard and risk side, but TAs equally have an authority. So I'm just looking at it, I'm trying to work out what it means in the balance of the two. And for me, in this paper, there isn't that clarity. I'm not having a crack at you. I'm just really struggling where those lines are or where the lines should be or how things intermesh, what those functions are.
I think if I can try and tie up two conversations here, I think that perhaps in the background to your submission, you need to outline the RMA functions in some of the statutory stuff that you talked about, because that would also take into account the RMA, the purpose of the RMA as well. So that is all encompassing of pretty much wellbeings and economic stuff. So if that was in the background of your submission, I think that would help councillors actually understand our role. And I do agree that I was the same, and I've looked at the bill, is that it doesn't feel like it relates directly to us. But we've got to provide some feedback for some other aspects of this. So I'm fine with your suggestions here on number one.
Councillor Scott?
Yeah, I have some sympathy for what John was saying also, because I think that when you look at the criticism of councils, they don't specify TAs and regionals and unitaries, they just say councils, and the rates impost has been put forward as one of the most inflationary things in terms of household expenditure, in the top three anyway. And I think somewhere along the line in the submission, we've got to make the point that the functions that we carry out are different to TA functions, and the unfunded mandates that get delivered to us are different from anything that they do to TAs. A fact that we substantially have all these consents that we have to deal with every time there's a change in case law, or any time there's a change in anyone sneezes in Wellington, we have to do something different. So it actually complicates the system. Now, that may change. That may change, and we've been promised that it's going to change. But I think we need to make that point. We ever since I've been here, it's what government does that causes cost. It's not. I don't think we've been sitting here thinking up anything to cause cost, actually. So that's my point.
Any other Councillor Southworth, and then Councillor Edge?
Yeah, I'm personally really disappointed in seeing the well-beings go, and it does feel like there's an increasing focus on economic growth, but so much of our economic opportunities are dependent on people having good well-being, and so all those other aspects are really, really vital. And of course, the environment is absolutely fundamental to any economy, functioning economy. But in terms of like the benchmarking that we had to give some commentary back on, that we fed back to, that's gone up on the DIA website, those benchmark metrics that we had really didn't provide a useful didn't distinguish usefully between TAs and regional councils. Like, it didn't provide particularly useful data, and I think we've got some changes to that, but it does really talk to what's been raised at the table so far today, that we need to really I think we need to handhold and go, here's clearly what regional councils do, so you really define it for the government to be able to put in here, rather than assuming that they're on it, because from what we saw of the DIA metrics, I don't think they really were. So that would be my feedback.
Pretty basic. Councillor Edge?
Yeah, I agree. I found it difficult, or find it difficult to see where the regional council functions fit in with this. But I don't know. I suppose this depends how far we go in our submission. Is it in response to this, or are we actually in a position to I suppose I'm thinking the four well-beings are fundamental to what local government's been doing. Do we actually say that and just say it's wrong for the government to actually do that, to take them out, because, you know, ABC, these are the things that we do now that cover those 4 well-beings. And the other thing I had in my mind was our well-beings are kind of related to the United Nations social development or sustainable development goals, and we've signed up to those goals as part of our obligations to United Nations. So I don't know where that fits in, and why is the government doing this? But I'm looking at section 10 and the section 10B, and it talks about the purpose of local government is to enable democratic local decision making and action by and on behalf of communities. So that seems potentially broad to me if we're making decisions on behalf of communities, and that when we ask the communities what they want or what they tell us they want, we're therefore acting on behalf of our communities to deliver those. So some interpretation of what that might services and performance of regulatory functions in a way that's cost effective. So it doesn't necessarily say you can't do this or you can't do that. It's just saying be responsive and cost effective. So how you shape that in a submission, if it's, you know, if you want to do that. So it's kind of drawing out what they've done. They've done some word, you know, but the way I'm reading it is that there's ability to make some interpretation about what that means.
Councillor, did you want to respond to that, do you?
Just to refer back to my previous point and that experiences is the purpose and core services has changed over the years, because they've changed a couple of times from wellbeings to more of a focus on core services. But it's in terms of what the future settings around limitation around council expenditure and performance measures might look like. But we can provide some more clarity about what it is that regional council does.
Councillor Sunkel?
Thanks. We've kind of covered the point. I was section 10B, the regulatory functions, and it's a very broad kind of conversation, whether it sits within building consents and monitoring in a TA or resource consenting and monitoring in our space. I just think a wee bit of clarity around those functions might be useful if they were teased out a little bit and going, those are the responsibilities that sit today. Where might they sit in the future? It's kind of, this is what we do, but there is a question mark where we go or where it goes, just to highlight the thinking so that they don't get lost, if that's possible.
Yeah, I just had I had a couple of points, and I think most of them have been covered. But when I was looking at the narrow definition of core services, it's really missing out on what a regional government is, and our water quality, quantity management, air quality monitoring and improvement, biodiversity protection, biosecurity, but more importantly, the natural hazards management that's outside of just the civil defence emergency response, which is the preparation work and everything else. So I think they're really missing the mark on some of these at a regional level that we look after. And I'm really interested in that conversation around, if you remove the 4 well-beings out of the Local Government Act, is that kind of going to mean that as a regional council we don't look at economic, social or cultural issues, and we have more of an emphasis on the environmental stuff because that's our mandate? So those are questions that I have heard in the ether that it would be good to clarify. I know that we have the RMA, but if the RMA changes as well, does that have any impact? So, because with us, the RMA and the Local Government Act is kind of mashed together. Councillor Mackenzie, I know that you weren't in the room to start with, but this is the opportunity to provide some feedback on this particular part. So if you've got any comments to make, now's your chance.
Yeah, you're throwing me under the bus. Sorry, I was upstairs talking to doing some other stuff. I'm not sure I have any comments at the moment, other than this bill seems to be a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, which to going too far in the wrong direction, and I think the government is trying to bring some balance in, and I think we need to perhaps reflect in a submission that the government's response to what they're trying to sort out needs some balance. I certainly support which seems to dominate the radio discussion on radio news these days. The way to solve that is actually to have economic prosperity, and that helps deliver the other well-beings. And I think to a degree this council probably has forgotten that and needs to be reminded of that obligation, which I suspect is what this government is trying to do. But whether it's got the settings right or not, I don't know.
Good feedback. Thanks, Councillor McKenzie. Joe, did you, or Councillor Davies, I see you put your hand up there for a second?
Yeah, not much to add really. Just I think, again, it's just kind of confused messaging from the government around reform. Kind of following on around the idea of these following services being core services of a local authority, and you read through them, and of course there's obviously local territorial authorities, regional authorities performing both. There's tension between both around some of those core services, and so yeah, I'd love to see more clarity around all of the reform packages that the government are working on, and if they're really speaking to each other.
Councillor McKenzie will just finish off and then we'll move on to the next section.
Well, look, if I can just come back, and you talked about river management before. My reflection would be that actually, and if you use that as an example of what I suspect this submission is trying to say, or what we're trying to say to the government is trying to say here is, and if you put it into our river management context, it's actually a little less about letting nature take its course and all that other stuff, but actually a little bit more about focusing on what the community wants us to do, which is actually give them protection from flooding. And whatever that looks like, whether it's using secondary flow paths or stop banks or whatever. And it's not about telling people that that 50 years ago they built in the wrong place and you're now on a floodplain and we're going to move you off. It's actually a more pragmatic attitude, which is how do we respond to the community needs here and give them the protection they want. And all these things are doable. But if you keep getting sidelined into the wrong direction about the natural pathway of rivers, historical pathways and rivers like that, you start to lose your core function, which is actually flood protection or some sort of level of protection for our communities.
Thanks, Ian. I don't think we need to go into do you really want to say something, Councillor?
I do. It's not about that at all. It's the government is wanting to look at our economic values and ensure that when we're considering something, we consider the cost of things, not only the short term, but the long term. And what are the long-term gains for the benefit of the public? And when I said this morning, the misunderstanding that people have to say that natural and nature-based design getting confused with the rivers running free is wrong. It's about what is a more cost-effective way of dealing with nature that's coming at us fast in terms of climate change. And those things I'm talking about are part of an adaptive response to climate change. It's none of that. I'm sorry, Councillor Ward. What's your suggestion?
All right, we'll move on to the next. Thanks everybody for the comments, and I can see that there's a difference of views in these matters, but that's where I think finding the balance is going to be really, really important so that we can move forward. But we'll move on to the next section because there's a fair bit there too as well.
Yeah, so this is around the amendments on the council transparency and accountability theme. So there are four main ones there. So empowering the issuing of a standardised code of conduct and set of standing orders, both of which binding on councils, requiring councils to include the code of conduct for newly elected members, Some requirements there for the Chief Executive around facilitating information sharing between councils and elected members, and that also might include a regulation making power for the process for how that would happen, and also emphasising local government principles, including in the local governance statement, principles around freedom of expression and responsibility of elected members to work collaboratively. So in terms of the discussion here, the government's intent is to bolster the connection between councils and communities and improve consistency and clarity for the community and councils, and support elected members to be effectively represent. So in terms of what that means here, of note, council standing orders have local discretion in terms of the casting vote and extra time for public forum. Those are the two key ones. And then, for the code of conduct, being able to provide that local context as well. So really keen to hear Council's direction today. Do you support the intent of these amendments for more consistency, or like some alternatives in terms of ability for local variation to the standardised set? Yeah.
Councillor Mackay.
This is one where I think that we do need to try and maintain some optionality or some opportunity to put in a local flavour to it, to both the standing orders and code of conduct. I think a framework is healthy, but I think it's probably more appropriate from local government body than perhaps government direction. That's how I see it.
Councillor Davies.
I've just got a question and then I'll pass on my feedback. Just around the secretary, empowers the secretary. Who is the secretary in this setting?
So that's the CE through the minister. Yeah.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
So I'll go back and clarify that, but that's essentially the minister. Sorry. Yeah.
If I could get some clarity on that, that'd be awesome. Just because I do kind of understand why it makes sense to go to a national standard and a national code that would just come down to councils, because I think it would clear up a lot of the nuance. And we know, there's the lawyers would probably be unhappy about this because you'd remove that local context ending up in the legal system. But I just think members should be aware, like, that this would give central government quite a significant power over councils, because at the end of the day, the standing orders are how we run our business. So it's quite an important thing to ponder, and it's almost a political, philosophical question as well. So I'm probably going to think about it some more and then get back to you.
Councillor Scott.
Yeah, I tend to agree the thinking that Joe's going down there. I think that what the questions that this council needs to ask itself, and we're pretty well developed in terms of the amount of times we meet and also some of the experience that's sitting around this table. And I think the question that you've got to ask yourself here, looking at this in front of you, would any of this help us? Would any of this stuff have helped us any further than what the help we may have needed in the last 3 years? And my quick answer is probably no. So I think that some of this stuff really needs to be in our hands. I can see why this is here, because I know that that some councils with less experience go through some tremendous costs in terms of the cost of this, where councillors just don't take any notice whatsoever of the codes of conduct. So I'll be interested, Joe, to find out what your thinking is on this. When you get yourself landed, let us know.
Will do. Thanks, Peter.
I'd just like to remind us that we didn't actually pass our code of conduct this time around, and we spent two and a half years drawing that up. So I mean, there might be something in there, you know. I've got a question around the standardisation of the standing orders. I know you've got a discretion there, but how deep? Is there any indication of how deep they're going to standardise those standing orders, and what, apart from what you've got there, would there be any flexibility locally to be able to do, you know, things that maybe like, I know that part of the act, part of this bill is to removing tikanga Māori from CCOs, but would it disable us from having our own tikanga protocols, and if we wanted to, in your local areas, for instance?
That's a little unclear at the moment. I mean, in the cabinet material, they refer to standards NZ in terms of setting those standardised contacts, but the level to which there would be flexibility to even just, you know, have your own logo or so forth on the standing orders or code of conduct is unclear, but that's a point that we could make. Another alternative to seek local variability would be sort of a process whereby councils were clear where there was variation and that councils had made decisions to have that discretion, but then ultimately maybe the minister could override that.
And that's the next question: is if you didn't want to you wanted to have some local discretion in your code of, your code of conduct or your code of your standing orders, a council, who's going to police that? So I think that needs to be kind of drawn out. Who's actually actively going to call out a council and say, well, what are you doing? I have no idea how that's even enforceable. I've got Councillor Edge.
Just picking up on Councillor Davies, on Schedule 2 of the bill, it does again talk about the Secretary as approving the Code of Conduct and the standing orders. So clarification of what that means. So our current whatever we've agreed, the current Code of Conduct, current standing orders applies until we get the sign-off from whoever, which
might be a new role.
So the idea of having some nuance in both of those can just be struck.
Yeah, actually, I think just jumping onto that, Grant, I think actually that's probably my feedback, is that needs to be a more maybe that needs to be like a parliamentary piece of law or something, like the Code of Conduct and the standing orders, rather than having the concentration of power in one person to simply rewrite every council's primary documents, maybe, or even some kind of ministerial political impact, just so it's a democratic process. Someone democratically accountable that can issue those kind of orders.
All right, we'll finish off here with Councillor Sunkel, and then we'll move on to the next one. Sorry, is there something urgent?
Yeah, I was just going to say I've seen on this bill here that the rules for performance measures by the Secretary for local government, who's identified as the Secretary.
We'll get clarification on that, Councillor Sunkel, and then we'll move on to the next one.
I was just sort of thinking subsidiarity is a wonderful thing, but within our laws of the land, we don't have different rules for Canterbury, Otago, Leaston, Brookside or wherever. So if we have standing orders within a country and those are those operating procedures and orders that we work to, then what is the problem in a sense? If we are ruled by the rule of law, and that's what we are, do we need all these subsidiary writing of standing orders and the like in codes of conduct when we are otherwise applying and giving effect to the law?
Sorry, I was just going to clarify. So, and I can do this as part of the submission information that comes back. But you've got the minister and you've got the secretary, who's essentially like the CEO of DIA. But I'll just seek some clarity there around how that sort of interface between the minister's responsibilities and the secretary when it comes to signing off and developing none of them are quite technical amendments that have been suggested by the local government sector as well. and they're of varying relevance to regional councils, but yeah, modernising public notice requirements in terms of publications to press and print media, removing the requirement around 6 yearly service reviews, clarifying authority of acting chief executive around certificate of compliance, third-party contributions there, which is more relevant to territorial authorities, amendment to extend the maximum length of chief executive's second term to 5 years, and then removing the requirement for councils to consider the relevance of tikanga Māori knowledge when appointing CCO directors. So the intent here is for greater efficiency. As I noted, some of them were proposed by the sector for a number of years, so this has been a way to collect some of these. Removing the tikanga requirement could impact on Māori participation, and this was a point that we'd made in previous submissions on local water done well. The direction being sought here is, with the exception of proposing that oppose the amendment to remove the requirement for councils to consider the relevance of tikanga Māori knowledge when appointing CCO directors, to align with our previous submission from council on the local water done well bill, where this point was made and strengthened to include Te Ao Māori and Te Tiriti. With the exception of that one, council generally supportive of the regulatory relief proposals on the basis that they support efficiency, or is there further information you need in order to make that decision? Yep.
So any questions? Councillor Mackay, I'll start with you again.
Just a question of clarification first. The maximum length of a chief executive's second term to 5 years, that's currently if they don't go through a full open selection process. Is that correct, Stephanie?
Yeah, so currently the council can choose to extend a chief executive's contract, and it's 2 years, and you don't have to go out. That would mean that extension would be 5 rather than 2, but subsequently it still requires council to go back out to market after that extension for a full competitive process for the chief executive's role.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification. Just with regard to this one, if I can get to my screenshot, because I screenshot the bill. Why isn't it opening? And as I read it, the clause, I'll get it up big enough so I can read it, that they're wanting to change around 57.3 for the local authority is identifying skills and knowledge and experience of any director of a council-controlled organisation where the knowledge of tikanga Māori may be relevant to the governance of that organisation. I have no problem with the changing of that. I also have no problem with you being quite specific about treaty partnership. But for me, when we're looking at CCOs, by and large, don't we want merit-based people on a CCO? So I just feel that I wouldn't want to preclude some governors based on what feels like a very narrow definition that you're wanting to push back on here.
Councillor Cranwell. I could see you in the corner of my eye itching. So.
Oh no, just it doesn't say Claire. Just for clarification for myself, Claire, it doesn't say you have to have. You're not Māori itself. It's just a little bit of knowledge. So I mean, I don't know. I don't see the issue. That's me personally. But it doesn't stop the council or the CCO putting it in anyway. But if you take it out, it means that it'll just become, people probably just won't add it. I mean, you're probably going to have half and half probably on this one if you do put it in or if you say about it. But, I mean, it's not going to stop anyone not getting appointed if they say they haven't got tikanga or relevance. All they're going to say is, no, we don't. So it's just a question inside, it's not binding. Anyway.
Any other comments on this one? I know, yeah.
Can I just add, I don't disagree with Yayan, but I think we need to be very careful about how we craft the response back, because I think that you rightly point that we have provided some response back in submissions to other, probably more contentious pieces of legislation with some definite direction, but with this one, I don't think we want to preclude anything. I mean, I'm not going to petty with a rent, but...
Yeah, and the submission I refer to was in terms of the water services entity, so perhaps also can provide that as the example and be clear on that in submission. Yeah.
Councillor Mackenzie.
I was talking to a government minister yesterday, and he was referring to, maybe he was referring to this, but are they trying to clarify the level to which regional councils should be are they proposing to clarify what our requirements are in terms of how mana whenua is involved in processes, and if that is the intent of this bill, he was proposing that it's to have mana whenua at a higher planning level rather than involved in the individual consenting issues. Is that part of this bill?
No.
Yeah. These particular amendments are related to regulatory relief. Yeah.
This is very, very specific. Yeah. This particular one. We don't have any CCOs yet in this regional council. Any other comments, Councillor Sunkel?
I sort of tend to agree with Councillor Mackay in that I don't want anyone to be precluded if they do not have something else when they bring the skills. And if, as Councillor Cranwell states, that's fine. I am happy with that. But I do note in other opportunities that things don't necessarily sit in such a simple light. But yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Maybe in the submission there might be a way to word this rather than being binary, opposing or supporting or something, actually working out the nuance of what's been spoken about. I'll leave that into your hands. I'm not going to dictate how that works here. But Councillor did you have something you wanted to say, Councillor South?
Well, just pondering on that one. I mean, it doesn't take an awful lot to put together just a short hour of training. So, I mean, maybe that's the way to, institute directors, you can pick them all sorts of bits of training. Doesn't cost an awful lot. I've just signed up to something $70. It's something that's really getting embedded in across many. I'm looking at job apps, job adverts at the moment, and there's lots and lots of different jobs are asking for this type of thing. So, it's out there. It's part of being a bicultural nation. It's not difficult to skill up on. You just get on Google. So I don't feel that there's a problem. I think maybe could maybe highlight the opportunity for some good direction on a website or something. I mean, it's not complicated.
I've done hours and hours and hours and hours, and while they might be a bit confrontational here in my professional roles, I would be really embarrassed if I stood up and went to a job interview and said, I did an hour online with whoever, and now I feel I am culturally appropriate to apply for this job. I would not be, I could not be. So I think there's a difference between doing a wee bit of learning there and saying, I have learnt to say kia ora. I'm being facetious, but that's what it feels like, an hour of learning on the side, as opposed to hours upon hours and what feels like half a lifetime of engagement and involvement. It doesn't necessarily agreement, but a much wider understanding. And so it just challenges me a wee bit that we might go, well, I've done that hour's worth of work, therefore I've ticked the box, and it feels like a tick box. It's not a genuine, and it wouldn't be genuine for me if I stood up and presented that as saying I am now culturally safe to join this organisation because I've ticked that box over there. It's a wee bit of a challenge, but it's not genuine.
Right.
John. I just want to say to John, I would consider you to be to have relevance tikanga Māori knowledge. 9 years here. Before that, you've been on CWMS with Charlie and crew. You've been to the marae, etc. You know protocols when you go to the marae. You're not like, you've never done a course. I don't know if you have or not. But, but I'm just saying, just lived experience, right? So that's relevant of tikanga Māori knowledge because you've lived it. So you don't have to, because it. Oh, thank you. See that?
So I think there's some in the submission, maybe the nuance rather than the binary, but maybe emphasise the education part of this. I think would be maybe something that might work. I'm just sort of thinking on the top of my head here, but one other part that I was thinking in regards to this part, the other parts to this section was when the removal of the public notices and the service delivery reviews, just ensuring that if we're doing that we're not losing the transparency and accountability. Those two pieces are, if they are inherently lost, are in conflict to the rest of the stuff that they're trying to achieve with these changes, and also efficiency probably as well. But yeah, anyway, we'll think that's it. Though, one more slide on next steps, I believe.
Yeah, and just to mention on that, the public notice requirements, there's also probably some technical commentary make there about ensuring it's translate to other acts as well. So Lagoima's not at odds with LGA and things. So we'll just make some commentary there. Yeah.
Just another document you might want to have a look at is the Auditor General's document, Putting Integrity at the Core of Public Organisations, of how public organisations operate. It's reasonably recent, and there are things there about respecting our constitutional framework. So I mean, there are things in here that, is this bill contrary to some of the things that another part of government's already got in place?
Okay, thank you for that feedback. So, in terms of the next steps, get you a draft submission by Monday, I think the Monday, 18th August. That's probably at the latest. And then, have a week to provide feedback on that. And then we'll incorporate that feedback and, provide it to the chair for sign out. At this stage, propose that suggests that indicate council wish to be heard, but obviously whether that's taken on board will depend on timing of the select committee hearings and report back on to the Strategy and Policy Committee on the 10th of September. And just signalled there that further announcements are expected from the government on further amendments later this year.
Can we just add one extra part into that in maybe a day before the delegated sign-out sought by the chair, just to send the final to all council laws? I think it would be a good process just to share that out, given what happened this morning as well.
Yes, certainly. Yeah, been reflecting on the conversation this morning, and we'll build that into the timeline just to make
that's good.
That visibility. Yeah.
Any other feedback before we close off for the day? Nope. Okay, so I believe I'm on the karakia, aren't I? All right, we'll close out for the day. We've got whakatakata hau ki te uru, whakatakata hau ki te taonga. Kia mākina kina te uta, kia mātaratara ki tai. E he aki ana e akatura, he tioa he ki huka, he hauhu ti hei Māori ora.